ready for that. All right, I am calling this meeting to order at 10 a.m. Beth, could you please call roll?
Austin.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Leffler.
We lost her.
I'll come back to her. McNulty.
Here.
Murray.
Here.
Smith. She's absent. Do we have Leffler back?
Not
Nope.
yet.
And present for CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski, Deborah Wishmeyer, and Beth Stormbrenner.
All right, do we have any additions to the agenda? None. Okay. Any public comment? I don't think so, as we don't have any public, but always good to check. Okay, then we will move to the consent agenda with minutes from November 11th, 2020. Approval of monthly financial statements, bills for payment, CCS website redesign contract, and rail support grant agreement for fiscal 2022. Does anybody
I
have
move. Oh, sorry.
or go for that?
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Jacobson.
Then can we got a motion from Kate and a second from Mick. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Austin.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Leffler. McNulty.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Doesn't look like Pam's back yet. Okay.
All right, next we have business. The first order under business is planned absence succession plan, which Rebecca put a succession plan in our packet for our review. I don't know if we want to start with any sort of review of what's in there or if people have questions.
And I just have one question. In it, it said that, hang on, now I need to find the spot again. It said the executive director will develop a separate detailed planning document prior to their absence for executive committee review and approval. I don't think that we need to approve that. I mean, like, that to me is operational. I think that we should review it, but I don't think we need to approve it, which is a small, tiny thing, but I think just is, right? Like, we're not going to know if you're missing something operationally. You guys just make the magic happen behind the scenes. So I would say that we should take out and approval. That is my question. Everything else looked fantastic.
I only had a question about, it's on page 6 of the plan, page 29 of the packet, under determination if an acting executive director is needed. So I wasn't sure because it says that the board and acting executive director should consider when determining whether to hire an acting executive director. And I'm wondering if one of those should be acting and one of those should be interim.
Yeah, that does sound confusing. I'll make a note to review that.
Okay. I made a few notes about that in mine. So if you want, I can show you what I have later. I had a couple of things that were like grammatical things, but that was the only thing really of substance.
Cool. Yeah, and this is a document that executive committee had previously approved when Chris was giving notice, I think. Beth, is that right?
Yes.
So then I made some updates just around language and then adding a planned absence or planned short-term absence since that wasn't included. Oh, and Pam's back for your minutes, Beth.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Pam. Pam, we were just discussing the planned absence succession plan. Did Any questions or comments about, because you're going to be leading the way when,
Yeah, I figured that out, actually. No, I read it over. It looks fine to me. I don't think I have anything right now. Yeah.
Okay. And then page 42 is like the start of like our internal training and planning documents. So this is, again, like a very high level overview, and Deborah and I will be digging in a little bit further. I did want to be very conscious of like this sort of like 5 to 6 months between now and when I start leave, that I'm not like sucking up all of Deborah's time with training. So I do want to kind of space it out. So she's not actually doing 2 jobs that much earlier. But I'm happy if any of you have previous documents or similar tools that you've worked on for your libraries or managers or anything, I'd be happy to review them as we're working on ours.
I think you've created something that a lot of us are probably going to steal because of the whole succession planning requirement in serving our public that many of us don't have. And my board is like, that's not necessary. You're not going anywhere. I was like, okay. I mean, I'm not, but still,
I mean, that's a nice vote of confidence though, Kate.
I guess my board president has said that I'm not allowed to leave until I retire. Like, I'm pretty sure you don't get to dictate that. So, I mean, that's true for Rebecca, but not for us. No, just kidding.
I think that's fair.
I do have one question that was probably answered when I was having computer issues. Rebecca, are you planning on being gone just the 3 months?
Yes, that is my plan.
Okay, I was kind of what I thought, but I just thought I would clarify that.
Yeah, I did
Ooh.
have a note in there too, which I kind of went back and forth about, that it was the planned or unplanned absence that is expected to last, well, 3 months was the cutoff. And I didn't know if we wanted it to be strictly 3 months or if we wanted to give any wiggle room in there or.
Like, unless otherwise authorized or something like that
Right.
by the executive committee.
I know we had a couple of people at my library who went out for leave expecting to be out 12 weeks and ended up being out like 14 weeks. And so I wouldn't want it to have to like kick into this whole other scenario if it's just a very short extension. And I don't know if that's like, you know, executive committee can decide how to run that. And if we got to that situation, then executive committee could say, we understand what's going on, so we're applying the same thing, or if we need it to be spelled out.
When I've had that happen in the past where someone extended like their time off longer than they had planned, we treated that like we were making an accommodation,
Mhm.
and that then we just approved that as necessary because we couldn't determine an exact time length.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that too. I just don't want anybody to feel like we're locked into something if we need to write in wiggle room.
I certainly don't feel locked in. If these are in many ways, like we said, not procedural, but guiding documents. And that way we can say, well, 12 weeks is ideal. The other countries would argue that 12 weeks is not ideal at all. And I would argue that myself, but that's a different conversation. But if it's 14 weeks or 16 weeks, for whatever reason, we will make it work.
Okay.
So I guess kind of along that line, Sarah, though, that made me think, you know, we have short-term and long-term, and there's like a switch that is flipped if it's one or the other. But if it is this kind of blended model, let's say it isn't 14 weeks. Let's say, you know, that Rebecca surprisingly ends up having triplets and decides to take off 6 months. Sorry, Rebecca. I mean, there was no other logical like example to use in that scenario.
Either that or she has triplets and she comes back in 3 weeks.
Fair.
That seems more likely. I'd be like, Matt, you and the baby stay here. I gotta go.
Right? You got this. But I'm wondering if we need to talk about if it starts with a short term and then is modified and has to turn into a long term. I mean, I think like just adding a sentence to long term that this would also apply, you know, and be triggered if a short term where they've already been out 3 months and have to be out like another whatever period of time could switch. I don't think we need like a separate like interim like in between the two plans, but just acknowledging that sometimes short term turns into long term. Well, I mean, CCS has already dealt with that, not with Rebecca, but
Right, that's true.
Yeah, and so this document is specific to like the executive director role. It's not sort of our general leave policies.
Mm.
But yes, I think that makes sense that we should add in just like a sentence in the long term that says something like, if a short-term planned or unplanned short-term leaves turns into a longer thing, like executive committee should discuss whether an interim is needed.
Mhm.
Okay. Do we need to approve these changes? It's not marked as action, but I was thinking,
Why don't I do the revisions and then put a clean copy in next month's consent agenda?
sounds good.
And then it'll be easier to read and
And then Rebecca, I think I neglected because on page 7, it also has the information about succession plan approval. And so I think just succession plan review, just to change that in that spot as well.
okay.
I mean, I guess, because you're not talking about the policy, you're talking about in that the actual plan that you're developing that was referenced on page 5. Four?
So on page 7, that's referencing like this actual document.
Okay, so that we do want to.
We do want to approve.
I didn't
I'll
have that flagged, but then I was rereading it.
And call the other one like an operational plan or something, just to
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah, I like that because then it's very clear that it falls under the purview of staff and not the board.
I did have a question about page 7 also. Now that I flipped to it, thanks, Kate. It says that the executive committee will form a transition and search committee within 180 days to plan and carry out a transition to a permanent executive director. Is that 180 days from the start of the absence or 180 days from when it's determined that the executive director won't return? Because 180
will not return.
So
180 days from when they will not return.
okay, so like somebody could be out for 3 months and then determine they're not going to return, but then there's 180 days after that to form the committee?
Yeah, I mean, like, I would hope that executive committee would not wait until the last minute to do so, but but they would.
Well, and it's 180 days to form the committee and plan and carry out a transition. So I read that as going through the entire hiring process within 180 days.
All right, so I'll focus on the plan and carry out, not plan to carry out. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I just don't want us to have an acting director and then be like, we got 180 days. You got this. We'll get to you, don't worry.
Well, I mean, look at Waukegan, right? Selena left 1.5 years ago at this point, and they still don't have anything, and they haven't even posted. Like, that's not what we want, and that isn't fair,
Right.
you know, to the person serving as acting, because you don't have the full authority, right? And you're kind of like, well, am I not? I don't know. And it just, yeah.
All right. That's fine then. I don't have anything else. I think, Rebecca, if you take the feedback and make the adjustments and then present it at the next month's meeting, I think that's a fine way to proceed. And if anybody has any questions or anything to change between now and then, just let Rebecca know.
Are there any, so the back pages have like policy numbers and everything. Those are largely empty right now. We're a mix of outdated and empty. Do we have any concerns about having that like in the packet for next, because Beth's going to work on updating those?
I don't think that we need to list, like, I think having that document, but for us in the packet, I don't think we need any of that or any of the even like listing of even partial account numbers. I don't I think is necessary. And I would argue that as part of the transition to the new board president each year, that they should be given like a pass-coded copy of this to have. But just from a hacking fraud standpoint.
Okay, so we'll finagle that for next month and have those separate.
Are you talking about pages 14, 15, 16, 17?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those accounts? Yeah, I think, I don't know that all that information necessarily needs to be included in here for executive committee. I think it is, of course, important for the acting director to have, but even if it had on here, like who knows who the legal counsel is? Like, do we go to Beth for everything? Does Beth know where all this stuff is, or does some stuff?
Yeah, I think it's more important that we know who to ask for this
Yes.
sort of thing, as far as executive committee, as long as staff knows where to get this and we know which staff to ask, I
Yeah.
think that's all we would need.
But like, what if Beth and Rebecca both abscond with the triplets to Tahiti? And Deborah's like, I don't know, they didn't give me this stuff. No, I would just still say that like the president should
One
get
person.
one copy just to have it. I mean, my board would be clueless, let's be honest, but
I think it's fine to give it to the president too. I don't know that it needs to be as part of this whole.
Everyone, right.
agreed, agreed. I feel like it's more like an onboarding document for the new president.
Well, it's also like a disaster plan document where
Right.
at our place, the assistant directors, the director have it in their files. And it's something that if something happened, somebody would know where to look for it. Backup. So,
I mean, if everybody escapes to Tahiti with the triplets, I'm just going to call all the attorneys until I find the one that says, yes, I'm the attorney for CCS.
Fair, that's fair.
It is a short list. I like your strategy.
I mean, I don't know if Tahiti allows extradition, so like, they wouldn't have absconded with money, just with the babies,
Right.
just to be clear.
We're just gonna live the beach lifestyle.
Matt as well. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion for this plan? Are we ready
And
to?
I just ask, it's not really about the plan itself, but it is about the plan, which I think is really awesome. And I think if possible, you should like scrub it clean of like all of the stuff we just talked about and share on directors only, because there's been so many questions about succession planning. And I feel like this is really, really clear. And a lot of libraries would love to steal this and take it.
Sure. I'm pretty sure Chris stole it from some other organization that's like on the front page, but I'm happy to share our copy.
Yeah.
Love
Because
sharing.
people have been kind of freaking like, I don't know. I'm like, they're not going to hold back your per capita money if you don't have a succession plan, but some people are, I'm a rule follower, but just not with this.
I will do that and I will send it.
Awesome.
I've decided it's a next year problem.
Yeah.
It's one of those, we're working on it. We're in the process.
Ditto with my policy on security cameras. Like it's on my list. It's definitely on my list.
I'll share mine with you. We just passed it.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah. That'd be great.
Sure. Okay, back to business. 6B, FFCRA update on page 43. Rebecca, do you want to share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, in talking with Beth and doing some reading, I did not plan to request the executive committee or board to formally extend FFCRA benefits for CCS. And I think if we get in a situation where someone needs additional assistance due to COVID-19, we can handle it on a case-by-case basis. So I just wanted to put that out there in case there were any concerns.
Okay. Without asking about anyone in particular, are childcare issues a thing that you tend to see at CCS or no?
No, we have a very small number of staff members with school-age children. And since we're all working from home, when school's like canceled for a day, they're able to kind of juggle, work later hours or adjust as needed.
Okay.
How much sick time do people get a year?
We get 3 days every quarter, so 12.
So 12. Okay, cool. It just
I like that you do it quarterly. We do 12 also, but we do it January 1.
We do it the same as vacation on a rolling per paycheck basis.
No, we're not gonna change now. Okay, yeah, if anything comes up or you need anything more formal about FFCRA or any of the many alphabet benefits that come with COVID, then we can talk about it, but it seems you have a very good handle on what's going on with the staff and making sure everyone is supported and able to work or not work as needed.
Yes.
All right, next we have COVID-19 data.
So I asked Bob to kind of poke around in the ILS to see what data might be helpful for directors. So we have a lot of drafts in the packet. And then we have a couple of updates that aren't in the packet. So I'm interested in your feedback on if we're putting together like a COVID dashboard for directors, what would be helpful so we can get that together before governing board. There's some like sample questions on page 43. So I don't know if you'd like to look at the graphs together and talk about them, or if you just want to talk about these specific questions, Sarah. I can share part of my, Deborah will have to share her screen
I'll come take a drink.
for part of it.
I wouldn't mind if we just went through briefly a high level of what each of the graphs shows, and then if people have questions, then we can discuss them.
Okay.
I see that Kate gets all the good data, but we're mentioned once.
Yeah, I don't know why Northbrook is Bob's default, but I'll share my screen now to go through what's in the packet, and then we'll briefly look at Deborah's screen. Bob's working on a web tool, so you could see that as well. So let me pop this guy up. And so, yeah, a lot of the graphs that Bob puts together and a lot of the reports he puts together in general distinguish between, and you can see it here, the yellow line is my item checkouts, whereas the blue line is any item that checked out at your station. So one of my questions is like, is that helpful information, or when you're looking at this data, do you just care about like what's checking out at your library? So that's one question.
And I think we also need to clarify when we're saying all checkouts, I'm presuming that that is meaning, so like that would include all ILL, intra-CCS ILL items that we've gotten that checked out at Northbrook, not all Northbrook items that checked out just in general.
Yeah,
correct?
we can clarify the language here. The title of the chart is checkouts at Northbrook stations.
So that's what I was assuming.
Checkouts at the Northbrook location, regardless of the material. And so the yellow line is like, but just Northbrook stuff. So the difference between the yellow and the blue is really like stuff coming from other places.
And I think for this chart, it is helpful to see mine versus all, but when you start getting into the multi-year comparison, there's too many lines and it's not easy to immediately parse out what those mean. So we need to like strip some of that away. And then does renewals also include, just because again, because of how renewals work, does it include renewals of our items by our patrons checked out at our library? Because of course, if like a Glenview patron checks out our item at our library, but then the automatic renewal will be assigned to Glenview. So I think we also need to understand that these are all renewals, or these are actually renewals that are patron or staff generated. And if it includes the auto renewals, I think people need to understand that differentiation, because then you might have a checkout assigned to Northbrook, but then a renewal assigned to Glenview because of the patron, right?
Is that
I
true?
believe that is correct, that when an item auto renews, it auto renews per the item's assigned branch versus the original checkout location, but that's something we would need to confirm with Bob.
Because
Yep.
just like if a patron goes into the OPAC, into their account and renews through their library's portal, it's going to assign them to that library, even if they checked it out like at my library. So I think people need to understand that, because now that we do auto renewals, which I love and would never want to change, I think it does change how you look at the data.
I have some notes on that. Other thoughts? So the next one, and some of these I think are going to be a little bit duplicative, so I don't think we'll have as much discussion on each one. So the next one is the same as the previous, but it's for 2020, so you see the big dip. And then graph 4 has like a little bit too much going on for me. But
Yeah, this is like what I was talking about,
Yeah.
of like, just take out like, only show like 2, right? All checkouts or my item checkouts, because it's too much. You can't actually parse what the graph is trying to show right now.
Yeah, we have Bob's working on another format that we'll see when we pop over to Deborah's screen, that I think is a lot clearer and shows the trend lines in a much cleaner way. We've been working on these for a while, so we're popping back and forth. So graph 4, it's like not maybe our most helpful. Okay.
But yet I think it is probably the one that I'm most curious about, because I want to see comparisons, right? For
The
me,
data
I tend to
cleaner.
like it's interesting to see what's going on now, but I'm more interested in seeing trends over time.
Yep.
So graph 4 shows a little bit of, it's more nuanced, especially in November, December, because is that when you started letting, let's see.
December 3rd was when we started doing intra-CCS ILL again.
Yeah. So I think that, some of the lines in there show that those kinds of changes, and I don't know if those are the kinds of changes that are really helpful to see in the graph.
Yeah, I think that this could be improved with some different color selection, like grouping color, like doing some colors and line distinctions to make it a little bit easier to read. So I hear that the data here is really helpful, but we want to look at some other ways to display it.
Yeah,
like the nuance.
right. So like maybe all checkouts or my item checkouts only, but maybe not both of them.
Yes.
And this is like completely unsolicited, but Rails had NK Emery come and do a great series on data visualization that I found tremendously helpful. I cannot articulate but it helped me learn like what to look at and how to look. And I think that would be something, if Bob hasn't taken that, I think that would be a really helpful series. It's all archived on the Rails CE website. And they have a data visualization. She has a data visualization tool on her website that you can use to help you show the best way, which I think is also really awesome. And I've used it a bunch.
Yes, I think on all of these, we definitely have some visual improvements that we can make to make them more scannable and readable. So I'm really at this point looking for what data is useful.
Okay.
So one question that we had was about unique patrons that are checking out. So
and are these our unique patrons or any unique patron? Which for us, it's going to just be ours, but for Algonquin, it might not be.
Yeah, so
because right, it's kind of all right, I looked at all of this and I looked at it again this morning so that I could ask intelligent questions, and then I asked stupid questions.
Yeah, page 47, you can see, again, it has the separate lines for all patrons and my patrons. So it's showing both and it's showing the comparison. So yellow and green are 2020 All patrons are yellow and blue. So again, I think, actually, Deb, can you share your screen real quick?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh, Rebecca, you'll need to stop sharing yours first.
Oh, okay, yes.
All right, there you go, Rebecca, if you want to grab the control.
Thank you. We're just having like a small firewall issue in the office. So, so this chart here, and I'm sorry if it's not super big, but this is more kind of what we're looking at where we want to see. I mean, this chart has some revisions that need to happen to it, but this style where we're looking at the bar chart, and we've got 2019 in one bar, 2020 in one bar, the months together, and then like the trend line to show the difference between the like year over year. I think this version is a lot cleaner. It's a little bit like, it's a little bit tough to have a double axis on here. So we might still want some revisions on this guy, but is this, and also everything's gray because I started requesting specific colors from Bob. So he's like, I'll work on that. But is this like style, I think is much more helpful.
Agreed.
This is great. This is,
Yeah.
great. I
I,
wouldn't think about it too much.
yeah, this one, I could take this one and put it in my board packet and show my board, be able to look at it and know what they're looking at. The other stuff, they would have a lot of questions about my patrons versus all patrons versus, so this just makes it nice and clean.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, that's like, how much do we care about my patrons versus all patrons when we're looking at like trying to get some clean data to look at? To me, like looking at everyone who's checking out in your library seems reasonable because you're deciding on the policies of what's in and what's out. So I like this style a lot better than some of the other ones. One question that we've gotten is like unique patrons in the library and like how many of our patrons are back, not necessarily how many items are they checking out. So that was on page 47 of your packet, but I think even this we could translate into this other sort of like bar chart style to get kind of that more clear month to month, year over year.
And something else that might be useful that we do with our board reports is, using this style, because I do think sometimes I want to look at my patrons versus ours, because we get a lot of comments of like, well, yeah, but those are all people not from Northbrook. And then it's like, but if you look at the numbers, it actually is like 95% Northbrook. So slow your roll. But like taking the bar and splitting it into non and Northbrook within the same year.
Bob and I are having some discussions about that sort of like stacked nested thing. We're still working on it. So yes, I like those that we talked about. And Deb, I'm gonna ask you to stop sharing for a minute.
Could we, because you were looking at before she does that, the Northbrook unique patrons that is on page 47 of the packet, do we have a comparison one in that, or is that still being worked on? Because, okay, because I also think that, like, again, at least for the back end, for us to understand exactly what is showing, is it unique patrons anyone? Because, or unique patrons are like, so I'm noticing like possibly a data error, because if you look at 2020 all patrons versus 2020 my patrons, oh no, never mind. That makes sense, because we were open from July to November. And so we're able to easily see that like a very small percentage of non-Northbrook people were coming in and checking out. But we weren't allowing people to do curbside from, when we started curbside in July and then again in November. So that's why it disappears. Never mind. I'm answering my own question. I just didn't look at it right.
Thank you for talking that through though, because I was kind of wondering about that, and that it makes it easier for me to understand since you talked it through.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think it is helpful, like if I was showing this to my board, I would probably put in some footers like, hey, we were open from July to November. We were closed entirely, from March 13th through July, I forget, 10th. And that way they can kind of match it up to what we were doing as well, which would be helpful, I think, for the board and for my management team, frankly. Because I get a lot of like, well, no, we couldn't possibly because it would be outrageous, the number of holds people are placing if we opened it up, if we had started allowing other people to place holds for pickup at Northbrook. And
to what you had said that you were doing curbside only for Northbrook patrons, can kind of explains the difference in Northbrook patrons and all patrons and why it's not that great.
Exactly. But yet, if you look at our holds, you can see that our patrons continue to place more and more and more holds for curbside. So we're still seeing a high demand, whereas I know some other libraries have reported that their curbside kind of leveled off. So you could easily open it up to everyone.
Yeah, so those are largely the the circulation and checkout and renewal reports I have. The next set are hold reports. One thing that Bob did put together that I didn't include in your packet, just because we had a lot to talk about, were circulation reports that were broken down by broad format, like books, movies. Like, is that some, like, I think it was the top 4 sort of material type groups.
We already give that to my board. So yeah, if I don't have to have my graphic designer do that every month, that'd be awesome.
Others, yeah, no.
We include that kind of information too.
We do it ourselves as well, but we've got a subscription to OpenGov that we just signed probably 6 months ago. And we're still working through this. So that leads to my question. These are all very useful. And Kate asked a good question, like, how does staff use this? I'm not sure that my staff, I don't know if they would use this. They're like, okay, this is kind of what we thought, but for the board, like you said. But my question gets to, as we move forward in this, is there going to be a training component? Because having graphs and not being able to understand them is just as, might as well not have the graphs, right? And with boards, that's the director's responsibility to try to train them and really parse the information to them that they need to make good decisions. For staff, we run into a lot of walls because of the OpenGov. Like, it's taken a lot longer than I expected, but then I forgot that I've had years of training with data that most people haven't. And so is CCS going to take on that part or not?
I think you're singing my song. So yes. So these graphs that we're looking at are specifically focused on admin as a user. So we're refining which ones we're going to present, and then we'll present them at governing board with a walkthrough of how to read them. But to your larger point, we are talking about it with database management very extensively right now. Kate is losing her mind. It's fine.
I'm so excited. And it's in the strategic plan. So this is totally happening.
Yep. So we've been talking a lot about data literacy and competencies, and CCS can provide all the data in the world, but if people, we get all those questions I can't get what I want. And it's well, the data's there. So we are building a strategy now to do more training around what to do with the reports and how to read them and what they all mean. So yes, timely, and I love it.
And you have staff to do that, or are you looking to consider hiring a data strategist or a data analyst sort of position? Kind of I know Devin did that at Skokie.
Yeah, I don't think
because of the budget, the treasurer stuff, I don't remember a position being added necessarily.
No, we're not planning on adding a position. I think internally we have all of the skills and knowledge we need. Certainly we have some room to grow in terms of our staff skills, but it's really a question of us collaborating. Like, we have amazing trainers, and some of our amazing trainers have like a very sharp sort of like data analysis like mindset. And then we've got, you know, our IT folks who are really focused on the data, but not as strong in training. So it's really, I think, about putting them together in ways that are going to be productive and beneficial, not necessarily adding another position. Like, should, God forbid, Bob choose to retire anytime in his life, we'd maybe look at changing his position to be more sort of like outward focused, like some sort of, you know, Devin or Grant or someone. But at this time, you know, Bob's sort of more like a developer, database admin. So it's really about us working with him, like admin and member services staff, to help refine some of the output to make it usable.
Yeah, I think this is a great direction.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're
Michelle.
really excited about it. Deborah's going to handle it while I'm on leave.
I'm just going to add that we also are using OpenGov, but in particular, the black, gray scale with the yellow line going with the percentage, that's one of the most valuable graphs that I saw out of the whole presentation, because that's what my board wants to see. They don't want to see the numbers side by side anymore. They want to see it graphically, and we haven't figured a way to really do that. And is that going to be something that we can, I don't know, manipulate ourselves? I'm not sure what software you're using for that.
I'm going to be honest with you, Diane. I'm also not sure what software we're using. I think Bob's just building all of these. And I was like, oh, Bob, you can like do this in Excel. And he's like, I'm not using Excel. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? So I don't know how, at this point, I want to put together some reports for people to look at like in a couple of months. In terms of being able to manipulate them, I think that's a future question. And then like here, I want to make sure we have the data, and then the next step is like sustainability and like opportunities for other, like we don't have something like Tableau or you know, like our studio, like everyone has Google Data Studio, but do we want to have Bob and others invest time in learning one of these tools as opposed to doing these other things? We haven't really gotten that far.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump forward to talk about holds for a little bit. On page 48 of your packet, which is not what's on the screen, you'll see the chart that Kate referenced, where, you know, you can see that red line of 2020 holds at Northbrook is like shooting up like crazy.
Just as a reminder, oh, sorry, you know, you're still sharing.
Yep. So one question I had for Bob is how can we show checkouts or holds as a percentage of checkouts over time? So this is one where I am asking him to sort of stack those bars. So we'll have like one bar where it's like total checkouts, and then a portion of that is designated as these are holds that resulted in checkouts. So we don't have it in that like sort of stacked formation yet, but essentially on my screen, there's the data that we'd be using. So like what I'd like to see is like for January, the blue of holds for 2019 is displayed within the red for checkouts of 2019. So you can more easily see, okay, like overall checkouts are down, but holds are up. Because what we've seen in our previous data is holds traditionally have been a very small percentage of circulation. And, you know, my assumption, and I think your experience is showing us that that's changing, but probably not at the rate, like nobody's checkouts are back to normal in CCS. So holds aren't able to make all of that up yet. So I would like something a little bit cleaner to represent that.
And then it would also be helpful to add that percentage change trend line as well to something like this.
Okay. We love the percentage change trend line.
Yeah.
I love it.
Because not everyone can like easily look at, like they can see a general, but if for some people seeing the numbers I'm finding with some of my staff, is easier.
Yes.
Can you go back to that one you just had, Rebecca?
Switch back.
Yes, please. So, and I don't want to get in the weeds, but I'm just looking like at December. So it looks like the line for holds is taller than the line for checkouts in December.
Yeah, so that's holds placed. So it is possible that some of those holds just like there was a large percentage of holds that didn't get picked up. Maybe people were people were, you know, doing holiday stuff instead of coming in or not feeling well or whatever. But yeah, there's also maybe some data refinement that needs to happen. Like September's got 2 chunks. So it could be an error, but it could also be that a bunch of people placed holds and didn't come get them.
Sure. I mean, and I figured that's probably true anytime that people are going to place holds and not pick them up. So, you know, I'm looking comparatively in 2019 holds to checkouts, and holds is, you know, a small fraction. 2020 is a little different because that was how a lot of people were getting their materials because they couldn't come in and find them. But I was just curious about that part where holds goes greater than checkouts.
Yeah. Holds data is a little bit tricky, and it's something that we're still kind of struggling with. The hold itself like disappear, the hold record goes away when the hold is filled. So it's hard for us to say like, let's only count the holds that resulted in checkouts. Although we could probably maybe.
I mean, you would have to look at like the holds that weren't picked up, that list. I forget the exact name.
It's the unclaimed holds.
Unclaimed, thank you. Yeah.
To deduct them. It's clear. So, but that's a good.
Maybe it would be interesting to look separately at how many holds are unclaimed so that someone says, well, but wait, like, you know, 25% of our holds are unclaimed. It's like, well, actually it's 0.1%. And having that data on the back end, not in a graphical format, I don't think that's necessary, but just so that we can say on average, this percentage of holds are unclaimed that you could put as either a footer or as, you know, a separate document. Because a lot of times there's a perception like, oh, so many things don't get picked up. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah. So then when I'm your board member and I say, why were there more holds than checkouts? Then you can say, because this is how many don't get picked up.
On the flip side, a piece of data that I always find fascinating is like holds or patron registrations but no shows. I don't see those as negatives. I see those as positives, that even though someone puts an item on hold and didn't pick it up, it's a good piece of data because it's not a negative. It's like this person was interested, just wasn't able to come pick it up. So it shows that our collection is meeting a need, even if they didn't come pick it up that moment. They probably got it another time or something else happened. So it's,
or you could argue that that wasn't meeting the need because it took too long. Like you don't know until you dig in and actually talk to some of those people, which is where you kind of flip from just hard statistical data analysis into, you know, kind of like that UX piece of, well, why didn't you pick this up and start doing user interviews?
I think though, to Mick's point, I think you can at least say people saw the library as an option for this kind of information and, you know, count that as a positive. But yeah, then, you know, going into why it didn't get picked up or why the person didn't attend, you know, then you're really scattering all over the place with reasons. Good point, Mick.
Yeah.
That is all very helpful. Poor Bob. I'm gonna be like, I have a list, Bob. He loves when I have lists.
Bob has been working with me on a bunch of different reports, and I think he's like, oh God, when will this be over? Because I just keep asking more questions.
Yeah, so Bob had some interesting insight on just the difference between Algonquin and some of the other libraries because of policies that we're able to see here. Again, I think we've got kind of a lot of bars or a lot of lines happening in this chart. But it is interesting to see, as Sarah mentioned earlier, the nuance of holds placed by local versus non-local patrons because folks had different policies. So I have some notes about unclaimed holds and material types. I also—
And if there's any way, I know that probably not, because not everyone checks out through the ILS. but to add ebooks into that, I mean, I know it's probably not possible, but I'm going to just toss it out there.
Yeah, so this is an ongoing thing that we're working on. The e-content statistics through the ILS have not been consistent. As the data refreshes, it was like every time the data refreshed, it counted the checkout again. So we were seeing like 10 times the checkouts like in a month because someone's account refreshed 10 times. So we did take e-content, like Polaris wants to report e-content stats, but we're actually taking them out because they're super inflated compared to the actual statistics because of this data issue within the ILS. So we'll monitor it. Maybe one day they'll fix it.
Awesome.
So we talk a lot about circulation, but I did specifically ask Bob to look at some like non-circ data as well. And on page 51 and 52, we see items that are first available. So an item is first available when it's added and then like available for someone to check out or to fill a hold. So if it's like in an on order status, that doesn't count until it's been like received and processed, and then it's first available. So this is an area where we're looking at on page 51, physical and e-content.
Okay, because I was going to say we didn't do any cataloging in April and May, so I didn't understand.
Yep, so this is all items first available, and we could use some text here to say like that includes e-content. And then if you compare it to the graph on page 52, like here you're seeing, you know, April, you had literally no items that were first available. Whereas like in March and May, you had fewer, maybe those are items that were received and like previously just, you know, got finished processing or something. So.
And this would include, because it literally says all items, not only new materials, but any replacement items that we're getting. So it isn't just items, say, with a publication date of that year. It
Correct.
includes everything. And when it says first available, it could mean, as we do for our new items, limited to Northbrook holds. It just means it's available to at least one person in, and would not include reference materials, or is it only things that are holdable?
It does include reference materials. The first availables designation is really just to distinguish from like an on order status. So when you place your on order, like if you have an on order thing in there for like 6 months, it's not going to count it until the thing comes in and like has a street date.
So this is really what this is really showing us is tech services workflow.
Yep, absolutely.
I think it would be helpful to like kind of reframe that.
Yes. Yes. So
Because I didn't understand what this meant.
Yes. So yeah, this is, these are literally like items added to the catalog that are like ready to go to the shelf or to like fill a hold or something, but they're like ready to leave tech services out into the big wide world.
Mm-hmm. Items that have been cataloged and processed.
Yes. So, so yeah, again, we could look at doing, we could add a trend line here and or do a more integrated comparison between 2019. Oh no, we already have that. So we could add a trend line.
For me, what is most interesting is looking at high and low months, because this for me is something that I would use in terms of staffing. Like we collect this data in different ways in my library, and we look at it to say like, do we need to ask the processors to work extra, you know, in this month because we know we're hitting the end of the fiscal year and there's going to be a lot of orders at the end or right at the beginning. And then also just looking at, you know, on average, how many items are we cataloging and processing each month, and then being able to do a full staffing analysis, which I think would be helpful too for other libraries that are looking at potentially, you know, if CCS brings in a cataloger, how many hours of cataloging and processing do we have? And what are the highs and lows throughout the year, or is it pretty consistent? Ours is wacky, but that's just COVID. We're normally pretty consistent.
Yeah, this on page 53, we are then kind of bringing them all together again. So this might be another area to do like some stacking or like nesting. Um, but, um,
Because if you can apply, I'm sorry, Sarah, yeah.
I was just gonna say, so on 51 and 52,
yes,
red, blue for both of them. And then 53, it pulls the data from both of those charts, but now we're red, blue, green, and yellow. So I'm sure red and blue are like the default start colors, and then you add more. So if it's possible to do like the stuff on 52 in green and yellow, so then when you look at 53, and then you can see red, blue, and green and yellow side by side, I think that might be a little easier.
yes. Yeah, we definitely need to work out like color consistency.
Sorry,
And-
make our words for it.
Yeah, and
It
like,
would-
making it make sense. The colors, like colors matter. And I think, here we are just working with the defaults. So where do we need to use color more effectively is a kind of throughout question.
I would also encourage, once you guys are further along on the visual aspect, although these look really nice right now, I know you're still working on them, but to run it through the ADA checker to make sure that there aren't any colors. Like Mick printed it out in black and white, but there are some people that literally can't see them. So making sure we're using colors for people that have visual impairments so that they can easily parse out that data.
Yes. Yes. Page 54.
Sorry, Rebecca's like, stop talking about the visualization. We're working on it. I know.
A little bit, yeah. Like, I know.
I'm sorry. I'm
We're
sorry.
working on it. So page 54 is just kind of our last tech services. It's items marked for deletion. So this could be, staff actively like weeding things. It could be that the stuff has been weeded and sat for 6 months and then someone went and processed it. It's literally when the item in the system is flagged saying this is something that needs to get deleted. It also could include, Deborah, it could include like lost items that then are marked for deletion later. So not something that was like purposefully removed. Is that correct?
It would, so items marked for deletion, a staff member physically goes in and deletes the item, whether the status is lost or missing or what have you. So lost items aren't automatically marked for deletion. There is still staff intervention. So this would be a staff member went in and pushed the delete button for this number of items.
So it's literally pulling anything that has a status of whatever it is, withdrawn or marked for deletion, however the terminology is.
Marked for deletion, which is different than withdrawn. So we could do a separate chart that is looking at items that have a withdrawn status, but that is a more like transient status. Like some libraries may leave things marked as withdrawn for longer, and some may have it only for like an hour that something says withdrawn. So that may not be as helpful, but we can look at that as well. So I'm gonna.
Can I ask a question about the previous graph again?
Yes.
So one of the things that,
One?
and this is more from a staffing analysis standpoint, that it's helpful to look at this. I know that probably 2/3, I think, of CCS libraries are using the acquisitions module right now. Does that sound right, thereabouts?
Close enough. Yeah, about.
Okay, so like this wouldn't be helpful for everyone, but I know now in acquisitions we can mark it as received, and it would be helpful to see the time lapse for items on average between received and first available, so that we can make sure, again, from a staff workflow analysis, are we getting items out in a timely manner?
Noted.
Obviously, that doesn't take into account, because it wouldn't help doing it from on order to first available, because that doesn't, and it wouldn't help for like, oh, well, we know that we have, these items that we have, but we have to sit on. But even if you're sitting on them, probably for like at most a week for, the big titles, but that would be helpful.
So Bob did give me a link I can share now, Deborah, or at least that works in the office. So what Bob is working on is adding these reports to a dashboard. And again, like this is not available yet for public use. But it would have an option for some like notes here. I would want to ensure that anything in here you could download as something, because right now my right click is getting me nowhere and screenshots are not my favorite. You can change libraries, and I'm assuming that we could work with Bob to add like texts and dividers to say like, okay, well, like these are, we're looking at checkouts and renewals, here we're looking at holds, here we're looking at tech services. Like, is having things presented in general with the understanding that there's a lot of revisions that need to happen, but having them presented in like a web-based format like this helpful, or would you rather just get like a PDF or something else? Like how would you want to receive these?
This, as long as we can download, like you said, like a PDF, JPEG, PNG, whatever. And it would be awesome if we could add in the ability eventually down the road to like do comparisons, so that I could take Algonquin and say, well, we know that they've been open, like what are they seeing and how is it different than us? More for our internal use than for board stuff, but I would find that helpful. And having with the notes field, something that would be not only showing what is excluded, but a very concrete list of everything that is included, so that we can make sure we understand how the data was gathered.
Yes, there is an option that Bob's working on. Oh, that doesn't do what I thought it would do. There is like a comparison option, but it looks like it's just showing you like, here's Fremont and here's Algonquin next to each other, that you could like look at every, oh, that's kind of nice. Like Fremont holds still, Fremont's frozen, and then you can like scroll to see neighbors, but maybe some sort of selection opportunity to say, show me these 3 libraries or something. Okay, yeah, we have a lot that we're working on. Bob is plugging away and he's very patient as I'm like, change the colors. But this has been really helpful. I wanted to sort of use you all as a little bit of a focus group before presenting things to governing board. I want to refine what we're presenting and have maybe fewer, more meaningful options to talk through. And just to again say, to kind of speak to Mick's point, we do really want to make sure that what we're presenting is both useful and understandable, and that we're giving people the information they need to understand the reports and use them, as opposed to just access them. So we're working on it. Thank you for all of your feedback. Any other questions?
I'm wondering whether I wasted money with OpenGov now. I've got a 5-year contract. Do you guys want to do program right now too?
Stuff in there, like there's so much good stuff in OpenGov, because I'm like, oh, should this be our goal to like replace OpenGov and Collection HQ and all these things? But like, we don't have access to your finances, and I don't want access to your finances. So I think OpenGov is a very cool product.
We had those same feelings at the beginning because it took so long for us, and then we had like a 3-month break. We got training started, then we had the 3-month break because everything was closed down. And now that we're back on it, we're going to use some of the other features besides the graphs. So I think 5 years was worth it to get that good discount. So we're happy. But this is in addition to, that's how I'm looking at it. This is something that is a value added, something that we don't have necessarily all the stats, and it's easier if it's coming from the consortium.
All right. Anything else to review for that? I don't have anything else. I think I printed my packet all weird. It goes upside down now. So we can move along to the next things unless we need to stop here for anything else, but otherwise we are on reports. So President, I don't have anything to report. Secretary. Diane, do you have anything to report? You're muted.
Shoot, no report.
I thought that might be the case, but just want to double check. Treasurer.
We met, Beth, I don't know if there's anything that we need to report, but we met and Rebecca, we talked about the budget. Things are going well.
All right. Committees and groups. Do we have anything we need to discuss from committees and groups?
I just wanted to pause for a quick minute to talk about the CERC technical group. My staff had actually asked me to talk about it at governing board, but there was just like too much cooking and I didn't get to it. So they talked a lot about like their sort of regular operational stuff. And then the CERC group had a pretty lengthy discussion about sort of just like stress and morale and like curbside. What I love is that it sounds like it was a really productive discussion where folks were sharing like what's going well at their libraries and what, you know, their managers or staff or admin are doing to like make things better for staff. So Mieko went through the recording again and kind of pulled out a lot of the things that people had mentioned. So those are in the packet on pages 58 and a little bit on 59. I'm like a little like, I'd be happy to share this information if it is helpful to others and like pop it in the lib admin list. I had asked my staff if there was any sort of like correlation between maybe like new directors and staff who seemed more stressed or, you know, like anyone who maybe needed some like support from their neighbors, and nothing like that really came out. So if it's appropriate, I'm happy to share this stuff. If I shared it and then everyone were like, mind your own business, CCS, I'd rather just not share it. But I thought it was really nice that they focused really on like what's productive and helpful instead of just like, I hate curbside, it's the worst. So great job, CERC group.
I will echo that. You know, if they can rely on each other for ideas and support in a positive and constructive way, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's helpful to see these kinds of things too, because I think we all know our staff will tell us some things, but our staff will not tell us everything. And if there's another way to find out, to, you know, come around to a solution or something that would make things work better, you know, it's always nice if the staff will tell you directly, but we know they won't. So if there's a way to find out so that we can improve things for our staff, I think that's valuable.
I don't know that if I agree 100% with you, Sarah. So my strict manager we had a meeting after this, and she talked about how the experience was not good for her because, you know, we've been very lucky. Our staff was really positive about all this stuff, and she's like, you know, and I think CCS, she didn't put it as bluntly as I'm putting it, but like it became a kind of bad from what I understand. Like people were really just railing and so like, I can't keep staff and all that stuff. And it's important for their directors to get that information. It's not CCS's role to do that. And if the director is flailing or whatever, yes, we should support them as directors. I don't know how to do that. I think and then I don't know how for you to protect the privacy of the people who, like one of the libraries that was complaining the most is with a director that I respect almost the most, you know, and I'm like, well, I don't know what to do with this information. I'm not going to do anything with it because I'm sure they know, and they're just like, do your job. And if you're going to be toxic, I'm going to cut you. And then because, you know, like the truth is, if you have a toxic manager, they need to go. And we've all had that experience. And do you really want to put yourself anywhere close to that is my question. And I agree with Sarah, if there's surveys, if there's anonymous stuff, but like if Rebecca called me and said, one of your staff members, it'll take me about 15 seconds to figure out who it is. And then it's going to be like Rebecca said, or Mieko said, or whomever said, and then you're in the middle of this shit soup, and you don't want to be in the middle of this. And because if I have staff out defaming my library in public where I'm trying to recruit other staff, no offense, it's a big, big deal for me.
After our
And
staff at our meeting.
yeah, so I'm just saying, I would not send an all administrator meeting. If you want to have a private conversation with a director and say, hey, or if you want to have Sarah have a private conversation with another director, or Kate, or some of the more, I mean, Diane, like very experienced directors, like, hey, I've heard this. Do you need or want some support? I think that you're almost like the reference librarian, connecting people with people.
Yeah.
If I'm way off on this, guys, tell me I'm way off, but like, that's how I
think specific about anything. All I know is what's in the packet, and the packet is a list of like nice, productive suggestions.
And I agree.
I don't know who was angry and who was yet like, I don't know. I don't want to know. The technical group meetings are tricky, and I think our staff do a really good job of moderating the discussions in as much as they're able, because again, our staff aren't the chair of these groups, which is a challenge sometimes. Anytime you get a group of staff together, especially during a stressful time, there is going to be some venting. And we do try to remind people that like everything you say in these meetings is in front of your colleagues and could get back to your director. So like, be an adult and be professional. That doesn't always happen. And if there is something that is alarming or problematic, like I have reached out privately to directors to say like, hey, your staff members like having some struggles, or, you know, I don't know, trying to inflame their colleagues to do a weird thing. I don't know. But in this case, I would not send like a lib admin email that's like, hey, everyone's upset. Just like, hey, here's some great ideas that people were sharing at the CERC meeting. Like they may or may not have made it up to admin, take it or leave it. But yes, absolutely. I do not want to be in a he said, she said of like, your staff are all upset and hate you, or everybody thinks curbside's stupid. Like, I don't want to do that even a little bit.
I think, Mick, I think you had some very good points. Looking at what was included here, the fact that it's just very general, high level points of ways to take the conversation and have some productive results from it, I think is helpful. And, if the conversation comes up organically, I certainly would not expect CCS to be in a position to say, all right, this is where we talk about what your concerns are so that we can put it in a pretty bow and send it to the directors. I don't think CCS should step away from that. I don't think that's your role, but I mean, in a case where it comes up organically, it's nice if something can come out of it that could have a potential positive result. But yeah, I wouldn't go seeking trouble. And I don't think CCS does.
But I like getting data. This will come as no surprise. So I think, but assigning it to a specific person, I think is where, Mick, like you're right. That's where the issue comes in, because it's like, oh, wow, everyone at Sarah's library is super pissed off, but everyone at Anthony's library is super happy. And I know I've had staff, not from any of your libraries, reach out to me saying, I hear that Northbrook is doing all this stuff and your staff seem really happy. I'm very unhappy about blah, blah, blah. I always encourage them, like, you need to go talk to your director. I have no control over what happens at your library. And the best thing you can do is to talk to them, or get a group of people, if there's a bunch of people that are upset, and go and talk to them. And some directors are unfortunately not doing a good job with this. And that is really hard because it is definitely impacting their staff. But I, for one, find it helpful to get this kind of information so that I can just say like, oh, a food truck, I never even thought of that. Like, what a cool idea. Or, oh yeah, we're experiencing, like I'm totally stealing that. We're experiencing some, challenges here. We at Northbrook did a series of connect and reflect sessions. We've done them twice now, where staff from different departments get together. I have moderators that aren't me that talk to staff and help them process what has been going on, not vent, but process and think about like, what have we accomplished and how is this hard and how are we going to continue to get through it, which I think is really helpful and has helped me help staff process, which is I think what's happening here. And then the facilitators write up high-level summaries for me so that I can get an overview of kind of how things are going. And I would love a high-level overview so that when we have like our CCS, our maybe not a governing board, but like our director meetups, to be like, hey, it seems like at least in CCS, staff are still really struggling, or some staff are doing just fine, but others aren't. Well, how are you guys handling it? And it opens up the door to a conversation between other directors without violating staff, privacy. But I do agree if there's something specific, yes, having Rebecca either contact the director or Sarah to be like, hey, heads up, there's some staff that might seem upset, but also encouraging those staff in those meetings to talk to the directors, knowing though that there are some directors that aren't hitting it out of the park right now, unfortunately.
We actually had a staff meeting Friday, and we're working on our culture. And so prior to that, staff had to describe 3 words that described how they felt right now about the rest of the staff and their situation. And it was put into a tag cloud. So the big word, the largest word was friendly. And then the next one down, it was kind of a balancing act because it was stressed and flexible. And then supportive, teamwork, respectful, knowledgeable. So down in the very little microscopic words in this word cloud were, let's see, ungrateful, negative, petty. Yet there were, the rest were positives, so you've got a couple of people, individuals that are having issues, probably with the stress of everything going on, but we can't judge the whole thing on that negativity. So we're trying to make all the negative positive, and we've been working on this, but it just seems like right now, I'm surprised stress wasn't higher on the whole cloud. So I think it's just part of what's going on. Collateral damage, let's call it.
The other part of this is that if the CERC group or the tech groups or something like that become a little bit more toxic, my staff aren't going to want to go, and I frankly won't want them to go, because stupid rubs off is a saying I've heard. Like if you hang out with stupid people, you're going to probably become stupid, and if you hang out with toxic people, you're going to become toxic, and or it's just easier to get toxic, and that's why you need to cut that out, like to the roots. I sound really tough. I'm not tough, but like I'm a total pushover. Everybody knows that. But like, so it's just I agree with everything that Kate. I like the data too. Once I've had time to process it emotionally and logically, but yeah, I think you probably are all doing a very good job. All the meetings I've gone to have not been in any way like this, but just be very, very careful. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we do a lot of balancing with our technical groups. Like, we want to make sure that we're not squashing conversations that people feel they want or need to have, but also to keep things on task and professional can be a challenge depending on, the vibe. Like, and it is often, like a couple of people who have a negative opinion about something that can kind of start to derail the whole group. It's one of the reasons we added like meeting facilitation training in over the past few years, because it is an ongoing struggle. Like, we aren't batting 1,000 at it, and I think it's just the nature of the beast. I think my staff work really hard at it and are doing a good job, and like, sometimes we get a chair who just like wants to revel in stuff, and then we have to work a little harder. But I 100% agree. It's a dangerous, not dangerous, it's a dicey area, and like, I want people to be able to come to the meetings and feel like they had a productive conversation. I don't want people to feel like anything they say in the meeting is going to immediately get relayed back up to their director. But I also want people to understand that anything they say in the meeting is in a public meeting full of people in your industry who work really closely, and like, be professional. So it's sort of an ongoing topic for sure.
Well,
Yes.
I appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate how it was shared. I don't know that anything that I am reading in here is something that I could pinpoint back to any library. I mean, I can recognize what our library is doing that's in alignment with the things that are listed here.
Was it the food truck?
It was not, but it will be. I mean, come nice weather, I'm so 100% getting a food
Get the
Right?
food truck. I love that idea.
right? So, thanks to whoever did that. I think, in a couple months, the CERC technical group is going to get back and be like, you guys, we got a food truck.
I can't wait for that report.
Right. So, I think that the information, how it was shared here is really helpful, even just to confirm for some people, like, okay, we're doing these things. It matters more than I thought it did. And for others that aren't doing these things, to see, okay, other libraries are managing doing these. So either I can figure out how to do it, or I know I can reach out to somebody else in CCS and say, we're trying to boost staff morale, decrease burnout. How are other people managing their schedule? So I think this kind of information is really helpful, but yeah, to not have it become toxic or I think it is a good reminder for anybody. I think the higher you get up in libraries, the more you realize how small library land really is. And so when you're first working in libraries, I think maybe you don't realize that. So for people who are attending these groups, that reminder might be a good reminder to them too.
And like you said, this report is good. It's just, for me, I guess I'm having trouble separating from the verbal report I received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see how that might be, hard to reconcile as well. I didn't get any report about this meeting, so this is the only thing I know is what's written. So it sounds like a great meeting to me, but for Mick, I can see how it might be different if you got a direct report.
My direct report was not the one complaining. I'll just have that to say. My library is perfect in every way.
I'm sure. Did you do the food truck? Okay, so you're not perfect in one way.
Who did the food truck? Do we know?
Who did it?
I think it was Palatine,
Was it? Okay.
That genie.
I think, yeah.
Right? Darn it. It's my home library. We'll crash their food truck next time. Okay. All right. Anything else from any committees or groups? All right. Thank you for the valuable feedback from that group and the good discussion about how all that kind of fits in with what we're doing. Rebecca, anything else for you?
There's kind of a lot in my report, just like innovative stuff that wasn't like a discussion item, but I'm happy to take questions if you have any on any of the things.
My question is, what kind of direction do we need to do anything with the contract?
Oh, that is a great question. Thank you, Diane. I have been focused on the website contract with the attorney, so I need to go back to him with the innovative contract again. I did have another discussion with innovative, and a lot of some of the issues that I had are resolved. One was like they couldn't tell us what features and products, like not necessarily what features because it's a development and it's growing and changing, but even like what components of the product are included, but they have that straightened out now. So we'll be getting a revised contract that will include that information. My other big concern was the effective date. And as long as our attorney is okay with it, Innovative doesn't think they'll have any issue getting like some language that instead of putting in a fake date, which was their original suggestion that I vetoed, that we can put in language that says something like this contract will be effective like at a date mutually agreed by both parties, dependent on the development schedule. So I feel like that is going to be fine. I hope that I'll have the contract for you at the next meeting. But they've figured out some of their internal sales stuff, and then yeah, Dennis and I will go back over some of the questions I had about the contract, and hopefully we'll be good to go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Rebecca, this isn't something that needs to happen in the meeting, but I was wondering if you and Deborah could stick around so I could ask a question on the notice testing that you put in your report, but it's just a Northbrook related question, so we don't need to bother the rest of the executive committee with it.
That's fine.
And we're good with website redesign. We have a company selected and a contract ready to be signed.
Yeah, you guys just approved the contract, so
did.
I'll sign that baby and get it out. Sarah and Diane, I'll be sending you a digital copy of the Rails agreement to sign just through Adobe. We need the president and secretary on that, so I'll get that today. It'll go first to Sarah, and then when she finishes, then it'll go to Diane, and then we'll send it off to Rails. Unless you have any issue, I'll just sign the website contract just to get it done. Yeah, I'm excited to start work on the website.
I know it's going to be already launching right after you leave.
Yeah. Deborah's going to get a big stamp that says approved. She's gonna stamp it right on there.
It'll be fun. Okay. Anything else? All right, then I am going to adjourn this meeting at 11.
Are we not doing agenda building
Oh,
or no?
I feel like we covered it a little bit with like what we're talking about with these graphs, and then at our next meeting, we'll talk more fully about it because that'll be closer to the next governing board meeting. Is that cool?
So yeah, I had one thing, I guess, just with the conversation we just had about like the staff feedback and the technical groups.
Uh-huh.
Is this something that we need to have a discussion with the larger group? I know we didn't like come down on something.
Let me talk with my staff a little bit more. And I haven't been getting reports. Like sometimes I will hear from my team that I almost didn't make it through that meeting. It was terrible. I haven't been hearing that lately. It sounds like Mick heard it at least once, but let me check with my team before we decide to pop it on the governing board agenda. I don't want to get everyone riled up if it was a pretty isolated problem.
And I don't want to make it like a thing. I just wasn't sure if it is something that other people, like I'm kind of ambivalent, but it seemed like something that could, I don't know.
I also don't want to set an expectation that directors think that there's going to be reports like this back from all the
Right.
committees.
Yeah, and I can work that into my email. Like, this came up. It was a topic. Here's a summary. Talk to your staff.
And just to be clear, my staff member wasn't like angry or anything. She was just like, wow, other libraries are having a lot of issues. We're doing so well, and this is not bragging, it's just like, comparison like to the anger that other people.
You can brag when you get a food truck, Mick. That's when you can brag.
No, though I'll kind of second what Mick said as well. I mean, I did hear a little bit about this, but it was more like, wow, we're doing such a good job. There's some libraries that are struggling a little bit more. So I heard very similar things.
Yeah, and that was, I think, what my staff wanted me, like why they wanted me to like get it in front of admin was like, some libraries are doing really well and some people are really upset. And like, if there's anything we can do to support the people who are struggling, we should do it. And it's just a question of the most appropriate way to do that. So it does seem like there's some, as we know with all the things, there's some real differences in how libraries are working through this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You guys are killing it though, probably.
All right. Is there anything else? Going once, going twice. All right, then I am going to adjourn this meeting at 11:29. And we will see you all.
Stop our recording.